a parody logo of a panda. a, a panda with a metal folding chair raised above his head.
Yeah.
Showmanship and sportsmanship and villains and heroes.
Yes.
You gotta love it. You gotta love it. And you know I do. You know I do, Troy. Laughter dances with truth in Mostly Fictional Tales, where reality and fantasy engage in a tango. Welcome to Mostly Fictional Tales. Joining us again today is the remarkable Troy Heiner, whose life story is nothing short of astonishing. A retired NSA analyst turned to career change specialist, Troy's early career was spent crafting gadgets akin to those created by the legendary Q of James Bond. After battling cancer and emerging victorious, Troy now dedicates his life to helping others reinvent themselves. Get ready for a deep dive into the extraordinary tale of Troy Heiner, mostly fictional or not. It's worth your time. Here we go. Troy Heiner has arrived. At one time, in the long past, a known alias of this fellow was Taz. And let's start there.
It's one of those things, when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a radio announcer or an announcer at a baseball stadium, just an announcer in general. And
did you,
it was one of those things.
Did you have a particular radio announcer at the time? It wasn't Vin Scully, was it? Because that would be an admirable choice, but you're not a Los Angelino, are you?
No, but I mean, I used to hear Vin Scully occasionally on like the Game of the Week on Saturdays. A lot more Mel Allen, but locally where I grew up in Baltimore, it was Chuck Thompson. He did both the Baltimore Orioles games and the Baltimore Colts games on the radio. And he used to say things like, a whale of a play, and ate the beer cold, and go to war, Miss Agnes. Those were kind of his catchphrases.
I already love him. And I knew nothing about him until you just now told me.
You had to say ain't the beer cold if the beer company was, National Bohemian was one of the sponsors.
Okay. I can tell you. Generally, I am told I'm not a beer drinker myself, but I am told that beer is better when it's cold. Can you attest to this?
I can attest to this, but I've also had what most Americans would call warm beer in England. Cellar temperature, 50, 55 degrees.
Okay.
Yep. And as any British or Irish person would tell you that, if the beer is cold, you can't really taste it. And that's why American beer is so cold. Their beer is good enough that you actually want to taste it.
That is true. That is true. Cold kills your taste bud sensitivity. Yeah, so there's nuances in the beverage that get all mellowed out when your tongue is all zapped cold like that. Yeah, but man, is a cold drink very refreshing.
Yeah, so I will join you with that.
My beverage, unfortunately for us, is not enhanced at the moment, but that might be better for running a talk show or a podcast show here, is to make sure that the host is actually kind of sober.
Yeah.
I'm only going to go with kind of, because, it is Mostly Fictional Tales, and we have to have room for plausible deniability. So
since the name Taz was in play when I was on college radio, I was usually sober, but maybe hungover from time to time.
There is a difference. Yeah.
I always used to listen to Casey Kasem's American Top 40, and I would make my own countdown out of all the 45s that I had and record them on my little portable cassette recorder and, basically introduce all the songs and, try to be a radio personality. and so when I finally, got the opportunity to live my dream in college and be on college radio, I took the moniker of Taz, and I was on Sunday mornings at 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock. So nobody was really
Sunday
listening.
morning.
Thursday nights was my night to go out and have a good time, because my fraternity had parties on Fridays, and that was like work. So I would go and actually have fun on Thursday nights. But sometimes the person who had the radio show from 12 to 3 Friday morning essentially would be at the same place I was, and she'd be like, I'm too far gone. I can't go on the air tonight. So I'd be like, all right, well, I'm not too far gone.
Wait a minute. We had a modifier here. The word too far was involved here. So there's room for plausible deniability. And I like the way you roll there,
the FCC
Troy.
may not have been completely pleased with the fact that I had maybe a couple of alcoholic beverages.
They weren't listening at that time of day anyway, so it's not like they'd ever know.
That's true. And
they're not listening.
That's when I would play more of the music that I actually liked, and I have pretty eclectic taste, so there were some kind of very strange mixes that I would.
So you had a bout of cancer then at some point. Is this recently? Yes. 10 years? Within the last 10 years? What?
Yeah. Yes. It's been. It was 9 years ago when I had my cancer diagnosis. I was living in Hawaii at the time.
What's the warning sign that you were glad that you paid attention to, or wish that you had paid attention to, a month before, or?
Well, I wasn't living the healthiest of lifestyles. I was working way too hard, in that security apparatus job.
Oh, we're going to get to that a little later.
We're going to get to that.
All right.
Yeah, it's a stressful kind of job, and I was not taking care of myself, and then I was living in Hawaii, and my wife had she was starting a trauma center in the hospital on the west side of the island, and so she was going to visit the other trauma centers in the state of Hawaii, and I would go and carry her bags. When she took a business trip to Kauai, I was like, all right, I'm going to Kauai, but I'm going to hang out at the hotel pool and drink Mai Tais.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is a strategy, and I admire you for that.
So it was a January day. It was warm still, but it was breezy. And I was at the pool drinking lots of Mai Tais and not really feeling the effects of the sun, but I got a really bad sunburn that day.
Okay.
And then a couple months later, I started getting this growth on my scalp. I thought it was like an infected hair follicle or something like that.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't getting any better, and it kept cracking open and bleeding each time I brushed my hair and stuff.
Okay.
And then the next clue was I was at a 4th of July. I hadn't even had one of these yet. And I just started throwing up as like, something's not right, Yeah, it was melanoma that metastasized to my lymph nodes and then eventually showed up. And then eventually showed up other places. Yes, exactly. Yeah, so once I went to a dermatologist and say, what's going on up here? They did a shave biopsy and say, well, it's probably basal cell carcinoma, but we'll do our tests or whatever. And then they called me back, I think 2 days later, and said, nope, it's melanoma and you need to have surgery.
Oh,
of course, it's a genetic mutation as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether it was something I was born with or something that happened over time, with my cells, degrading or whatever. My wife could tell you a lot more about this. I married well. Early in our marriage, she was actually working at NIH as a research nurse studying what? Melanoma treatments.
Oh, doctor, heal thyself.
Yeah.
Wow.
So once I had the surgery and then tried to figure out what the heck I'm going to do next, because it had already metastasized. So it's like, it's still in my body. So we need to come up with a treatment plan to, chase down the free radicals and get rid of them.
Okay.
If you see a commercial for Keytruda, I had that.
Okay.
If you see a commercial for Opdivo and Yervoy in combo, I had that. That stuff nearly killed me, actually. But that's some serious stuff. That will, if there's something going on in your lymphatic system, it will find it and it will run it to ground. And it may take out some of your other organs in the process.
There may be some collateral damage along the way.
I ended up with a septic meningitis from that stuff.
That can kill you. Not that could have killed you, and not the cancer.
Especially since it presented as if I had a stroke, and if they had given me the infusion for a stroke, I probably would have just bled out or something.
Wow!
So my wife was like, "No, wait, let's again." I married well, right? Okay. My wife was like, "Nope, let's really find out. Let's do a spinal tap instead." And that's when they found out that it was, and so they put me on IV antibiotics and then steroids for 4 months, and then I basically didn't sleep for I spent a lot of money that Christmas, that holiday season, because I was up shopping online. It's like, oh, I'm going to buy this and I'm going to buy that.
Okay.
No impulse control when you're on steroids.
I can imagine. A really good friend of mine, he helped get my name in lights one time. That one time my name was in lights up on a theater marquee was because of my great friend Thomas Corso. And he started having headaches and blacked out. And he attended a conference call with his people in his company, and he was acting really strange. He had not even remembered this conference call. And when they found him in his apartment, he was blacked out, and he woke up in the hospital with a glioblastoma.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. He immediately had surgery, and they were able to get that, but he didn't last 8 months. And the last time and one of the things is that he didn't tell all of his friends exactly how gravely goddamn sick he was. And by the time I knew and understood and tracked him down at the hospice place that they had him in, I wanted to record a conversation with him, memories of things that he and I had done together, or things that he'd found funny. And I had wanted to play a board game with him, and he literally couldn't stay awake more than a minute and a half before he was drifting off to sleep, because he was too far gone. That made me want to create this particular show, Mostly Fictional Tales, is that I've got friends that I want their stories recorded, and I did not think that I would be living life and not having Thomas around, but I miss the fucker. I miss him.
Yeah,
he was a special unit. That would be his phrase. Let's kind of backtrack here. How does a radio announcer in his college days become, what's the pathway to land you at our nation's national security agency? And so how does that happen?
Well, it happened actually before I was on the air in college. So I went to Virginia Tech, and in the wintertime, Virginia Tech can be a very cold and desolate place.
Okay.
And I was studying engineering, and I knew that if I was going to study engineering, the people in my classes were all going to be engineers, not the most social creatures on the planet.
You noticed as well. Noticed as well. Okay. I was wondering whether or not I was the only one that thought this.
No. Clearly, you and I are in the minority in terms of people with engineering backgrounds who like to talk and tell tales.
This is true. This is true. And I don't get it, because they know so many cool things.
Right. But, they think, everybody knows that. Well, you'd be surprised. So anyway, I was, it's January, and it's cold, and it's snowing, and, I needed something to do, And so I was invited to this thing called a rush party. I didn't know what it was. I didn't
Uh-oh.
know what fraternities were all about. I watched Animal House.
Okay.
You know, that's about all I knew about fraternities. And so we're sitting, you know, we're standing around drinking punch, and this girl that I did not know came up to me and said, "Hey, I hear you are an engineering student." They're like, "Yeah," you know, and you know, wanting to be, you know, specialize in communications. Yeah, that's right. And you want to be you know, have some actual practical experience before you graduate. You know, so cooperative education, right?
All right, all right.
You
Now,
know,
this
right?
story is taking a different turn than what I was thinking, but I
Well,
like where you're going, sir. All right, so she
so
wants to know.
yeah, so she's like, yeah, she's affirming that, yeah, yes, I'm an engineering student. I want to be a co-op student. If it takes me an extra year to graduate, I'm okay with that because, you know, I actually want to get some, you know, put the theories of engineering into practice and actually, you know, see if I like it.
Okay, yeah.
So she said, okay, cool. Gave me a card and said, call this guy. And so, you know, it's like, all right, I called him. His name was Roger Hedgepeth. I'm calling the mayor of Blacksburg, Virginia,
Okay.
who actually also worked for the university in their cooperative education department, helping people find jobs after graduation. And he was the point of contact for this very special engineering program with the CIA. So, yeah, it was a very special engineering program where you first went to work in the drafting department, designing cool things. So think Q. This was basically you were going to learn how to become Q. Build little gadgets that were going to be useful for people in the field.
Okay, but things that are not fantastical, things that are actually going to be used.
Yeah.
But let me see if this is in the same ballpark. I had a conversation with a fella who was a political science professor that had done work with the CIA and for a long time, but then ended up getting married to a Chinese national and deciding that that it was more important to be happily married than it was to have a security clearance. So he then became a college professor, and he described a device for taking photos of documents in low light conditions, where the idea is that you put the document out on a flat surface, and then you have a camera that was like the size of your index finger or something, and it had a chain with a chain. The chain was basically your measure of getting your focal length so that you could take a photo of the document in focus so you could read it. You know, where you didn't have any optics to look through to actually take the photo, right?
I would say yes. There was, you know, I can't go into too much. Yes.
No, don't. I don't want your secrets. Don't want them. No.
So
it's not. It's
so again,
never that interesting, is it?
I was specializing in communications, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
So it was communications devices for agents, you know, conducting their operations in the field, wanting to not be detected by, you know, their adversary. Right. And there's lots of other different methods for securing communications now that didn't exist back then. But yeah, I worked in this, you know, it was called the electromagnetics lab. It doesn't exist anymore.
Okay.
But basically your first tour was to work in the design or the drafting department. So you were creating the documents that were used to build the devices.
Okay.
And then you worked in the mechanical and the electronic fabrication areas. So you learned how to assemble the stuff. And then you worked in the areas where you were testing the microelectronic components or the various components to make sure that they were within spec to go into the production systems that the agents were using. Okay. And then eventually, as you were, you know, like between your junior and senior year, he actually said, hey, you're going to work on a project and you're going to design things that are actually going to be used. And the things that I was being, you know, it's like, oh, so you're going to build a power supply and you're going to build this, you know, companding circuit. We're not going to tell you what it's going to be used for, though, because
Okay.
we don't have that clearance.
Ah. Well, you know, that
But I kind of put 2 and 2 together, and it's like, what would need its own power supply? And what would a companion circuit be used for? Probably for communicating over a telephone line. Okay, I kind of know what it is. Don't tell me, but I kind of know what it is. And then later, once I went to work as a full-time employee in my former, the same girl who gave me that card was my boss for a time when I was a co-op. And she was in charge of the overall project. And then she said later, it's like, now that you're fully here, I can tell you what it is. And it's like,
I strongly want to talk to her. I want her part of the story.
I've lost touch with her. I don't know where she is.
Oh, that's a damn shame for me.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Wow. You know, she was a graduating senior. Right?
Okay,
she had finished her program, and she was going off to be a full-time employee, a project manager, a design engineer at the CIA, and I was a lowly freshman, so I still had 4 years to go before I got to do anything cool like that. And the place I ended up working, the person who was my first boss, one of the questions he asked me during the interview is like, "Do you play a musical instrument?"
Oh,
now I did, right? When I was
what instrument is that, by the way?
So in elementary school, I started on the clarinet. And then I transitioned to the bass clarinet, and then I transitioned to the tenor saxophone.
Oh, woodwinds then. Okay.
And I also took lessons to play the organ. So if a skating rink opens up in your town or whatever, I can play. Yeah.
Okay.
Or I could go to the ballpark and play. Maybe that's my future.
Well, you're describing a kind of niche skill here. I'm not sure that's going to get you very far.
Those ballpark organist jobs don't come open very often. But yeah, so I was like, no, but I'm willing to learn. That's how I answer that question. So I didn't know at the time, but the engineering services branch, which is what they were called, had a band, and they played all the holiday parties, and then we played a summer picnic. So 2 gigs a year is what we played.
Well, those could be really great gigs.
Yeah, and the guy that was the guy that was my first boss, he was the guitar player, and he wanted to hire another guitar player.
Okay,
I didn't play guitar at the time. Okay, but I learned.
All right.
So we had a saxophone player, a drummer, a keyboard player who busked his way through college playing piano in piano bars. So he's pretty good.
Okay.
The saxophone player was also really good. The drummer, was a jazz drummer, usually played with brushes instead of with sticks.
Okay.
And so we would play bluesy, jazzy versions of Christmas classics. Hiram was the saxophone player. So we were called, and his name was Hiram Jackson, and so we were known as HJ and the Short Ribs.
HJ and the Short Ribs. We're going to hear a lot more about that
because he was from North Carolina. He could make some really good barbecue.
Well, very good, very good. I am down for the barbecue. Troy, let's leave the audience with this particular tidbit here. You can eat all the grain bran you want, the wheat germ. You can do all of your veganness or any of that, and you're still gonna die. Might as well enjoy life.
My goal is not to be the healthiest corpse in the graveyard. I don't want to be in the graveyard. I want to be cremated.
The proof there is in the pudding there, my friends. The proof is in the pudding. So we were talking about that you were in the electromagnetics.
Yeah, we were starting to segue into my time at the 3-letter agencies, at the Culinary Institute of America, which is also a 3-letter agency.
I bet they are very angry at having to compete with that. Yeah. I mean, very much like the World Wildlife Federation really hates competing with the showmanship of the WWE.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. WWF and WWE and all that stuff.
I
WWW.
a parody logo of a panda. a, a panda with a metal folding chair raised above his head.
Bringing back days of my youth when we used to watch wrestling on Channel 45 and
showmanship at its
stuff ever. Yeah,
showmanship and sportsmanship and villains and heroes. Yes. You gotta love it. You gotta love it. And you know I do. You know I do, Troy. You started working in designing gadgets and systems to be used in various gadgets. How long were you doing that for?
Well, like I said, as a co-op student is where I worked in that electromechanical laboratory where those things were designed, manufactured, and prototyped, I guess. But then in my days as part of the HJ and the short ribs, otherwise known as the engineering services branch, we were doing other things in support of a particular program that I can't talk about.
Okay.
But it was, interestingly enough, it was kind of, somewhat of a joint venture between NSA and CIA. It was about signals. It was about communications. It was about signals, and signals is more of the purview of NSA. But there were certain signals that were being used to communicate, for agents to communicate with each other in the field and to protect their communications so that, the adversaries were not spying on them while they were spying on them.
So I have a question here because my knowledge in the area is strictly pedestrian. But for the home viewer, perhaps we should tell them, in intelligence, what do signals refer to?
Well, I mean, signals are the way that any kind of information is transmitted from one location to another.
Okay.
So
it's signals between domestic people who are on your side, as well as signals that might be transmitted from enemy agents to enemy administrations and things like that, right?
Right. So, yeah. So NSA has, so if I'm talking about NSA now, NSA has two major functions: to collect the communications of our adversaries, the people that would want to do us harm as a nation or as a people. So that's one side of NSA, and that's called signals intelligence, otherwise known as SIGINT.
Okay.
And that's where I spent the bulk of my career, is in that field. And then there is the methods and measures that are taken to protect the communications of our military, of our officers overseas, from interception and interference from our adversaries, who also, again, they want to do us harm and disrupt us and everything like so. So that was originally called information security, or InfoSec. But now it's basically kind of rolled into the whole field of cybersecurity.
Everything's funneled through a computer, so that's where it picks up.
Because back when I started, computers were still not very prevalent.
You'll probably
radios
remember,
but
you might remember the glorious days of your 28.8 baud modem connecting up at lightning speed.
Yes. Or being in the middle of downloading something and then somebody picks up the phone to make a phone call. Like, no.
No. Oh, yeah, that 20 megabyte download was going to take 30 minutes. And now I might be actually being unintentionally generous there with the amount of speed a 28.8 modem would take a 20 megabyte file. But that was a significant investment in time when I was when I was a lad.
Right,
You know, I love living in the future. I love living in the future, Troy. You know I do. You know I do. You know, folks, you have been listening to Mostly Fictional Tales here. I have been your host, Rathgar, talking here with Troy Heiner, also known as Taz. I don't know if he did Razzmatazz or anything like that, but
if I had a companion on the air, they'd be Raz and I'd be Taz.
That is a beautiful combination. I'm sure you all will agree. You know, if you like what we have been doing here on Mostly Fictional Tales, you can help us out in a few easy ways, and they're free. You can like this video, you can share, you can subscribe. But if you're a real difference maker, you head on over to Patreon and support me there. I cannot do the show without you. And until next time, I have been your host, Rathgar, and I advise you all, you be good. But if you cannot be good, don't be caught.